Texas fails to pass a groundbreaking new abortion law, which leads a lot of us to ask the question, is it possible to outlaw something in which nearly everyone has at some point been complicit? Well, buckle up, Buttercup. Today we're diving headlong into one of the most divisive and important political issues in America. I'm Joel Kurtnitis.
And I'm Josh Hugo.
And you're listening to Constructive Interference. Okay, so last week, a lot of developments on the pro-life / abortion front, and probably things that if you hadn't heard about them, you're probably living under a rock. But one of the big ones happened in Josh's home state of Texas. So Josh, why don't you tell us about it?
Yeah, well, it was a bill. It was called House Bill 896. Now, the legislative process, to many people, to myself certainly, seems a bit Byzantine, a bit hard to understand. So in order for a bill to go to the floor of the House or Senate and get voted on, it first has to make its way through committee. There are various representatives who are assigned to different committees, and a bill is assigned to a committee who will then either approve it, disapprove it, or ask for amendments to it. So this bill, House Bill, let me get your number here, House Bill 896, was in committee actually last Monday. And this bill was unique as far as I know. I'm not aware that any other bill like this was really attempted seriously in the United States before. There have been lots of other bills that have sought to regulate or to put some sort of restrictions on abortion. But this bill was a very straightforward, very simple abolition bill. And the text of it was very short. We'll put a link to that in the show notes. But basically what this bill did is simply defined the unborn child from the moment of conception as a child. That in the state of Texas, the unborn child is a child and gets all the protections. It was a very short, very simple bill. And I was actually hoping to go to this myself. I guess I'll out myself here. I think, Joel, you agree with me here on this.
Indeed.
We are both pro-life. If that offends you, well, sorry. But yeah, so me and Joel, we're both pro-life, and I was actually hoping to be able to go up to Austin, because I lived near the Capitol, and offer my own testimony on this bill. And I had thought that I didn't have time, because it was a Monday, and I had to work, and I didn't really have time to take the day off to go up and put in my 2 cents as to why I thought this bill should pass. But as it turned out, I could have gone to work and put the kids to bed and gone and testified in favor of the bill anyway, because testimony went on until 3 a.m. in the morning.
Whoa, as opposed to 3 a.m. in the afternoon?
Correct. Yeah, it didn't actually start until late, but so there was something on the order of 8 or 9 hours of testimony, because hundreds of people came and filled up the committee room in the Texas Capitol to testify in favor of this bill. So as you already said, the bill did not pass. The thing was, this particular committee that this bill was before had 9 members, 5 Republicans and 4 Democrats. So basically the only way that this bill could move past committee and get out onto a floor vote in the Texas House of Representatives was for all 5 of the Republicans to agree that they were going to vote for it. If any of the Republicans didn't like it, voted against it, it was done. And
conversely, there's nothing that the Democrats could do to stop it with 5 if the party just stuck together, right?
Absolutely, yes. There's nothing the Democrats could have done to prevent this bill from going to the House for a vote. Of course, does not guarantee it would become a law,
sure,
but it was possible. So that did not happen. I don't know about the other Republicans because they really don't matter, but the Republican who was in charge of the committee, a man by the name of, let me make sure I get his name correctly, Jeff Leach, he came out against the bill. He was leader of the committee, and he was one of the 5 Republicans, so he came out and he killed it. And I want to read a quote from Jeff Leach as to exactly why he killed this abolition bill that would have made abortion actually illegal in Texas. He says, quote, "My commitment to advancing the pro-life cause is stronger than ever, and that's why I cannot in good conscience support House Bill 896. Legislation that subjects women who undergo abortions to criminal liability and even the possibility of the death penalty." Leach continued, So what he's talking about there is, as I had said, this bill was very straightforward. It did not actually introduce any new penalties for anything. It simply classified killing an unborn baby as a murder like any other murder. And theoretically, that, as he says, that could have put women who got an abortion as eligible for the death penalty. That would have been a theoretical possibility of this bill, and that's why he says he can't support it.
Mm-hmm. Which we don't really know the potential like all the potential outcomes that would have, right? Because a lot of people who have made the case for different sorts of abortion bills have specifically said, no, it would be the doctor, the abortion, person performing the abortion that would be subject to criminal liability. But in this case, I understand it's hypothetical. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. But so this strikes me, this strikes me as, I guess, a great, I'm going to say paradox. Something that really frustrates me about the mainstream pro-life movement. And when I say the mainstream pro-life movement, I need to clarify that I'm basically talking about the Republican Party as a whole. So
Not to put too fine a point on it, yeah.
Yeah, because I've gotten kind of in trouble for this. When I come out and I complain about quote-unquote pro-lifers, and people are like, well, that's not what pro-lifers are like. I'm a pro-lifer, and I'm not like that. So I want to clarify here. When I say mainstream pro-lifers, I'm talking about the Republican Party as a whole, and pro-lifers as a huge political bloc which votes for Republican candidates.
Sure.
And so one of the things that frustrates me is this seems like a great inconsistency. Abortion, in my mind, is a very, very simple, straightforward issue. There really isn't a lot of nuance in it. There are basically only two questions we need to answer to determine if abortion is right or wrong. The first question is it wrong to kill an innocent person? The second question is the unborn baby a person? If the answer to those questions is yes, if it is wrong to kill an innocent person and an unborn child is a person, then obviously abortion is wrong.
Right. So it's just a basic logical syllogism.
Yeah, right. And if the answer to your question is no, it's not wrong to kill an innocent person, or no, the unborn child is not a person, if either of those questions is no, then of course it's always okay to kill the unborn child, and we shouldn't have any sort of restrictions.
Right.
And what we see out of the mainstream pro-life movement, as really illustrated by Representative Leach here, is this sort of weird attempt to find a middle ground there, where a middle ground really isn't logical. If abortion is wrong, then abortion is murder. And if it is murder, then logically it should be treated as murder.
Right.
If it's not murder, then let's do it.
Right. So this sort of introduces the separation between pro-lifers that's been going on for ages and ages now, between what people have come to call sort of the incrementalist crowd versus the absolutist crowd. And that's it's really not a disagreement on the life of the child or the humanity of the unborn, as much as it is a tactical disagreement on how to go about ultimately reversing Roe v. Wade, because that was, of course, the Supreme Court decision that quote unquote legalized abortion back in 1973, Roe versus Wade. Everything that has happened in the pro-life movement legislatively and culturally has been in the shadow of that decision and trying to figure out how to introduce another fight that'll get us around it, or hopefully, in the light of modern science, reverse that decision. And there's been two different approaches, and I think that's sort of what you're discussing here. Is this would have been an example of a more absolutist approach that says, hey, this is just there's not really a lot of nuance to it. There is these are human beings and they are being killed, and we're going to stop it. And that's end of story. Whereas the predominant approach over the last few decades in America, and you see a lot of noise about this on the left, is the incremental approach, where they'll continually pass laws that are restricting of abortions. You have to have this kind of facility, and you can only be open this long, and these are the people that you can target, and you have to show them ultrasounds first, and you can only abort before this date, and just on and on and on, a bunch of restrictions, basically trying to death by 1,000 cuts Planned Parenthood and other abortion providers. And so this is kind of the central back and forth that pro-lifers have, and to me, I would say we have a whole lot of evidence that one of those is certainly not worked The other one really hasn't been tried as much, except it could have been in Texas now, but we see how that went.
When you say it hasn't worked, the mainstream pro-life crowd, again, by which I mean Republicans, will say that it has worked, and they will point to the fact that the abortion rate has actually fallen quite a lot. I don't have the stats in front of me at the moment, but if I recall correctly, there are approximately half as many abortions in the United States today as there were back in 1990, and they'll point to that and say that, well, that is evidence of success. To which I would respond that there are, and this is kind of getting into more detail than I really want to go into, but there are a number of other reasons why abortion might have been reduced during that time frame. And for instance, the fact that single motherhood is now completely accepted and embraced by our society, to the point where, today in 2019, for a woman to have a child out of wedlock on her own, maybe not even knowing who the father is completely accepted and uncontroversial in American society.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a change from then. Another change, which has been documented in various places, is that people nowadays are actually having less sex than they used to.
True story. I saw a lot of noise about that the last week or two as well.
Yes.
Poor millennials.
Well, that's yes. That's the final outcome of the sexual revolution is no more sex, it seems. But so yeah, people are having less sex today. People have accepted single motherhood as being just fine. Methods of contraception have gotten a lot better than they used to be, 30 or 40 years ago. Technology has improved. The ultrasound technology can now really show what a baby looks like. People post pictures of their sonograms on Facebook and say, "Hey, this is our baby, who's now won't be born for 20 weeks, but here's their face."
What do you mean, baby? I thought it was a clump of cells. Here's our little clump of cells. Everybody celebrate. It's a clump of cells.
Yeah. Well, it depends. If you want it or not, that becomes a human or not a human. But so all those reasons. I mean, technology increases, social changes, the fact people are having less sex, all these things contribute to less abortion. So I guess for me to look at that trend, which has been, there's been a very clear trend. If you look at the stats, 1990 was the year with the most abortions, and it's been going down everywhere since then, even in like liberal strongholds like New York City. In New York City, abortion is down.
Sure.
So to look at what the Republicans have done so far and say that it's worked, I'm not sure there's really a lot of evidence of that, because that downward trend can be explained in a lot of other ways.
So it might be about, the question of whether it worked or not is, the question of what the goal is, right?
Yeah. And what is the goal? And that's an important question, because you mentioned incrementalism, and I know people who refer themselves as abolitionists get really worked up about incrementalism and how it's wrong to regulate something that is evil, because by regulating it, you legitimize it, which, and I won't deny that there's truth to that.
Yeah, there's an element of truth to that for sure.
For sure, yeah. But at the same time, I think incrementalism can be fine as long as we keep the goal in mind. You say, in this case, if we say our goal is to abolish abortion, the goal of the pro-life movement is for abortion in the United States to be illegal. And if we say that is our goal, then it becomes acceptable, in my opinion, to use these sort of half measures to get to that goal, move the football down the field, so to speak, to reach that goal. But when we see things like what Mr. Leach said here, saying that he can't support this bill as written, not because it isn't a strategically valid choice, but because he doesn't agree with it. He doesn't agree with what it says. He doesn't agree with actually treating an abortion as if it were a murder. And you see that sort of rhetoric, that sort of thinking, like all the time in the mainstream Republican pro-life movement.
Yeah, and it's basically defeatism. I mean, I don't want to overstate it, but in my experience, there's a whole lot of defeatism, saying, we don't want to try because we think we might lose.
Oh, that's explicitly stated, because people will say they don't want to try this. I was going to get to this in a second. This heartbeat bill that was just passed in Ohio.
Yes, we had one of those in Iowa. Got shot down by the courts.
Exactly. He got shot down by the
Sorry,
courts.
did I just spoil it there?
Well,
Spoiler
no,
alert.
because this bill that passed in Ohio just now, there's a new governor. Do you know his name offhand? The new governor of Ohio? I will
I
find
do
out right
not.
here.
I thought it was Kasich until like 2 weeks ago when my wife was like,
It
no, no,
was
no, no,
Kasich
no,
until
there's
a few
somebody
weeks ago,
else.
and now it's some other guy. um, but yeah, so Kasich, did you say Kasich or Kasich? Kasich.
Kasich was what I understood it to be.
I'll say Kasich also. Yeah, so this heartbeat bill in Ohio was actually passed. It had been passed before by the legislature of Ohio, and Republican Governor Kasich had vetoed it. And the reason he vetoed it was because, just what you said, because other bills, such as the one in Iowa that you mentioned, and I believe that North Dakota had one, and maybe other states had one too. This sort of thing has been tried before. There have been heartbeat bills before, and
Mm-hmm.
they get shot down by the courts, and they never get enforced.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah, and that's the reasoning that they give to basically just shoot the whole thing down from day one, which is just it's really frustrating. Now I can see an argument for incrementalism in certain circumstances. Like my friend Steve Dace likes to say that incrementalism is fine as long as you're still moving the ball toward your toward the other guy's end zone. That's okay as long as you're incrementally going in your direction. The problem is when you start incrementally moving it in the wrong direction. And then you start to play like my Jacksonville Jaguars usually do, which is sort of just, you start 1st and 10, and then you're 2nd and 20, and then you're 3rd and 35, and you're going the wrong way. Now, that's the sort of incrementalism that we too often see within the pro-life movement is, an unwillingness to try. And the problem is this, okay? I understand if you don't want to, blow up your whole cause and lose it in one big gamble. And that is the fear. Like that is the fear that the pro-life movement faces is they don't want to lose it all in one big fight with an established Supreme Court precedent. They want to whittle it down until public opinion shifts to the point where they feel safe pulling the trigger. But the problem is public opinion shifts all over the place at any given time. And you can't use that as a reliable predictor of the way things ought to be. I mean, I think the Emancipation Proclamation, if you had polled people on it back in the 1860s, they probably wouldn't have had universal support or near universal support. Well, that was kind of the point of the Civil War, right? But it still had to be done. You have to have moral leadership in times like that. And the problem with these sort of half measures is that they don't make the moral case. Now, think about this from the point of view of somebody who is pro-abortion or would call themselves pro-choice. If they look at a halfway bill and say, well, okay, here's all these Republicans who typically hate government regulation and interference, but here they're putting all these ridiculous restrictions and fines and fees and basically trying to strangle the life out of these what they consider to be women's healthcare centers. It looks like hypocrisy. Whereas if you just make the case, hey, that's we don't want to restrict or regulate anything. We just want it absolutely gone because it's absolutely wrong and illegal, and it needs to be illegal because it's literally murder. Agree or disagree, at least that's a clear platform that makes people argue the merits of your foundational issue instead of hemming and hawing. And oh my gosh, I had to sit through the committee meetings here on the heartbeat bill in Iowa, and the arguments, I mean, it was like the whole Republican side had been coached to say, well, this is about expanding access to healthcare for women. Really, like it was over and over and over. No, I take that back. That was the bill that was passed the year before. It was basically defunding Planned Parenthood is what it was. But it was just clear that it was. I mean, everybody knew that it was about abortion. Everybody knew that it was the pro-life side trying to get it passed. But they considered it strategically wiser to stand there in front of the cameras and deny that it was about abortion the whole time and just say, well, we just really care about where women get birth control and we want to make sure that it's at better places and funding and like seriously. And it just, that's the type of incrementalism that just grinds my gears.
Well, you hear the pro-abortion people will say all the time, they'll say things like, well, you don't really believe it's a baby. You're not really concerned about that. What you're concerned about is imposing some sort of theocracy. You see these women will go to protest these Republican bills dressed up like the characters from Handmaid's Tale. And they have this idea that Republicans, pro-lifers just want to control women's bodies and somehow
which is so weird, by the way. Like, that's just such a weird... No. That's such a weird... So, yeah, right. No, that's just such a weird straw man to throw at anybody. I mean, that's such a weird thing. Like, I understand, like, everybody misrepresents their opposition's motives sometimes. And I've heard, people on the right say really stupid, ridiculous things about their counterparts on the left as well. But you couldn't come up with anything better than that? Like, really? You think the whole abortion issue is just a bunch of, religious nuts out there trying to control women's bodies like Sharia law? You think that's what I spend my Saturdays thinking about, is who's getting what birth control? Like, that doesn't even make any sense. Like,
it doesn't make sense
I don't
to me.
care. I literally could not care less who's getting what birth control where. I don't care. Like, I don't even want to think about that side of your life. You go do whatever you're going to do. Just don't kill anybody along the way and we'll be good.
Just don't kill anybody. Yeah.
That's it. That's it.
Yes.
That should be the whole. That's the pro-life case in a nutshell. Just don't kill anybody. Do whatever you want. Just don't kill anybody.
Yeah, but see, we don't make the case that way. So, like you were saying, then
can we get a bumper sticker and like copyright that?
Do what you want. Just don't kill anybody. Sure. I'll make that. But so yeah, so it's real simple. It's real straightforward. The pro-life case is. I mean, it's about the simplest case you could make. Like you said, just don't kill anybody. How much more simple could you be? But we don't make the case that way. Like you said, you have these Republicans in Iowa who are trying to, and no one's stupid enough to buy that. Like you said, no one is so stupid that they can listen to these Republicans try and say that they're really concerned about expanding women's health care when obviously they wanted to fund Planned Parenthood. Mm-hmm. So then imagine I put myself in the shoes of a pro-abortion person. I've talked to pro-abortion people about this, and they say, well, yeah, they agree with me. This is how it seems to them. Is that if you're a pro-abortion person and you have these people who say, we want to ban this because it's murder, but then they won't actually legislate it as a murder. They want to legislate it as, some sort of obtuse regulation where it's a little bit harder to get, or it's a little bit more expensive, or it's a little bit less funded. This heartbeat bill that just passed, if you read it, it does outlaw abortion after a heartbeat is detected, but it doesn't outlaw it as murder. It outlaws it more as like a health code violation. A doctor or a physician who performs an abortion after heartbeat is detected is not punished as a murderer under this Ohio bill. They're punished as having broken professional policy, and they might lose their license. Now, how is that morally or logically coherent? If I'm going to say we're going to ban this because it is murder and you are killing babies, but if you do it, well, you might lose your license for a year or some other sort of slap on the wrist like that.
Right. It's kind of like the 3/5 compromise.
It's very much like the 3/5 compromise. Yeah. But see, so from a pro-abortion position, if you look at that, it's like, what are you supposed to think? Is these people like make a bunch of noise about how they're pro-life and they say it's murder, but when it comes down to it, they don't actually like treat it like it's murder. So I would think from an outside perspective, it would seem that like they don't really believe that it is murder. Like what Jeff Leach said when he killed this Texas abortion abolition bill. It's like when he says he's like so pro-life, but he's not willing to treat abortion like murder. What sense does that make to an outsider?
Well, it leaves one of two possibilities, right? Either they don't believe it and they're just lying about it when it comes time to campaign, or they're cowards. And frankly, I kind of believe the first one is actually better. I think it would be better for them to be dishonest about it and just lie about it on the campaign trail, which is what pretty much all politicians do about everything, than to just to be straight up cowardly about it. And I think that's what I can't stand about it so often is they don't want to take the hard questions. They don't want to. In a lot of cases they're afraid of the media. Because the media will stand there and just sort through your 10-minute conversation to find the soundbite they want and then throw it up there to make you look like you hate women. They don't want to be seen that way. They don't want to. They can't wait to have their bill. They don't want to have their bill put up on the news and then have video of a sobbing teenager who just got raped and is being taken to a clinic like that. That's the type of thing that they're afraid of. And if you're afraid of that, you can't handle that, get out of politics. Seriously, you don't need to be there. If you can't handle that kind of narrative, if you can't handle doing the right thing and knowing that you're going to get blasted for it, get out. Make
Well,
room for somebody else.
I think they'd all get out then, wouldn't they?
Well, yeah, quite a few. I mean, there's a handful. there's a handful that will definitely err on the other extreme. We got a couple of those up here as well, but yeah, I mean, there's just I don't see any room for that. So here's my question. It's been, what, 40 years now since Roe.
More like 45.
Well,
Closer.
okay, at least 40, greater, equal than or greater to 40. Okay. And we've had a whole lot of scientific advancement in that time. I mean, you talked about ultrasound technology. Embryology has just come a really, really, really long way since that decision. But the question is, when you have culture and science moving one direction and politics is lagging behind, there's usually a cause. And in this case, I think the law is lagging behind a lot because there's a culture wide. I mean, abortion has been around long enough now, and so many people have been impacted by it that there is this massive meteoric impact of it on our culture that I don't think people can even see eradicating. I don't even think a lot of people know what a post-abortion world looks like. And I read a really, really interesting piece about this in the Federalist by Noel Mering. And it was just really, really, really well done. The title of the piece is "We Hide the Truth About Abortion Because It Condemns Us All." And just a fantastic article. We'll make sure we link to it in the show notes. You need to get out and read this and share it, honestly. But there's a couple paragraphs in the middle here I just want to read. She says, quote, "With the abortion tally close to 60 million at this point, almost no one can say he or she has not been in proximate or remote connection to one. Countless people go through life with the guilt of having been complicit in some way, either by accompanying, encouraging, abandoning, or undergoing an abortion. The reason gang initiations, especially murderous ones, happen is because complicity is a powerful tool. You are in this tribe now, united in the blood of guilt. Complicity distorts our reason, perverts our objectivity, and leaves us with misplaced, irrational loyalties. It also makes us recoil when others state obvious truths. There's nothing more offensive than hearing the truth we are trying to silence in ourselves." End quote. And that last line just really gripped me. There's nothing more offensive than hearing the truth we're trying to silence in ourselves. And if you look at, we've been talking about sort of the split on the pro-life side. But if you look at the other side, if you look at the pro-abortion, Planned Parenthood, pro-choice side, you see that they're really scrounging. They're grasping at anything they can at this point to continue justifying what science has, beyond all doubt revealed as a really barbaric and violent process that they're continuing to profit from. And so, like, why is it so difficult to get these laws passed? Why is it so difficult to move this absolutist narrative forward? I think Noel really hit on something great there, really hit on something powerful, and that is almost everybody has been impacted by this. Almost everybody is in some way complicit, and when you have a culture-wide complicity with an evil like that, it's incredibly hard to rise up against it. I mean, picture, people talk about the Holocaust in those terms all the time, but picture how hard it would have been in the middle of that going on to have normal everyday Germans rise up and try to stop it, and in so doing admit their guilt to all of it. I mean, that was sort of the purpose when they did discover the camps, when the Allies rolled through and discovered these camps. That's why they made the villagers march through it. Like, you knew this was going on. Why didn't you do anything about it? And you people don't want to be shown that sort of evil. And so I don't know. I thought that was brilliant, and I think it's a big reason it's lagging behind. Do you think that has any impact on these bills?
Oh, absolutely. Like you said, if you're complicit in something, you have a vested interest in keeping it hidden or keeping it from being taken seriously. That's why repentance is such a difficult thing. If we could simply change course and make a clean break with the past, then repentance would be easy, but you can't, because repentance means admitting and confessing that what you have been doing in the past was the wrong thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to mention, in the Bible, you see Jesus all the time welcoming people who are considered sinners by society. Well, the Pharisees, he rejects them and they reject him. And the reason for that is because the Pharisees are full of pride. It's like if they repent and admit that they've been sinning, that costs them social status. It costs them their self-image. Whereas the people who are sinners, the tax collectors and the prostitutes, in order for them to repent, they got no problem admitting they've made mistakes. They got no problem admitting that their past is dark and they need to turn away from it.
And stop shoving your religion down my throat.
Sorry. Not sorry. But yeah, so if you're ashamed of your sins, if you know that you have a dark past and you are ashamed of what you've done, then repentance can come as a relief. But if you are proud of your past and what you have done has gained you some sort of status or has gained you profit or has gained you anything, then repentance is a difficult and painful process that people just don't want to go through. And like you said, Joel, I think that's kind of the point where America and where I would say Republicans are at.
Mm-hmm.
Because like this bill in Texas, it actually contained language explicitly defying the federal government. And it basically said if the Supreme Court...
God bless Texas.
Well, almost. But yeah, so this bill that did not pass, this bill that the Republicans did not allow out of committee, actually contained language saying that if the federal government, if the Supreme Court goes against this bill, we will enforce it anyway. This law overrides federal law. And would that actually work? How would that happen? How would that work out in real life? I don't know. I don't know. That's a big unknown that will stay unknown. But as far as just the boldness of it, the brazenness of it, of putting the foot down and saying, in the state of Texas, there is no abortion, period, the line is drawn in the sand, that is such a bold action. Now imagine if that bold action were taken and it did work and Texas got away with defying federal government in that way. How much shame would that then heap upon all the other Republicans who didn't do that over the last 40 years?
Right.
And it's a terrible thing. I hate to say it, but I really think that is part of the reason why the mainstream pro-life movement rejects these sort of bold, what you call absolutist ideas, is because what if they work? What if Texas actually does this and it works? What does it say about the rest of us? What does it say about all the last 40 years? And people don't want to deal with that.
Right. And denial's a lot easier. Just pretend that what you're doing is right and good and awesome. And as long as you can hold that up and keep arguing for it, then you don't have to apologize to anyone. And you see the same type of thing, again, on the pro-abortion side. You see they've started to realize that they're not going to be able to hide behind the pro-choice banner anymore because, science has made it pretty clear that what's going on in an abortion is the violent death of another human being. And so as that facade sort of starts to melt away, you have more extreme positions coming to the forefront. You've got these laws up in New York that was just passed, and I guess it was attempted in Virginia as well, that are just towing the line of infanticide. I mean, it's just really, really awful stuff. Like, this is okay. You can have abortion all the way up to delivery, and okay, by the way, even if you have delivered the baby, in some cases, still okay to let it die. Like really, really, really awful stuff. But when you look at the narrative around it anymore, the Democratic Party has decided that the reason that they're losing the abortion debate is that they're just not going far enough. They're just not being extreme enough. So what they've come back with now is the, hashtag shout your abortion and things of this nature, basically going from it should be a woman's choice to this is an absolute moral good and more people should do it because it's awesome. And that's just weird, gross, and sick. Please don't be a person who says that kind of thing. If so, you really need to go check out. Actually, you know what? You could go watch the film Unplanned. It's out in theaters right now. I put in a plug for that for Abby Johnson's film. She can explain to you what an abortion really is. But I mean, look at other examples of this. So some of the extremism that you got on the left, the popular cartoonist Nathan Pyle was just recently attacked on social media because he once posted a tweet or a post celebrating the fact that his girlfriend was not aborted. I'm not even kidding you. Like, he was attacked for saying, hey, I'm glad my significant other was not killed before birth. And that was enough for people to start ranting and raving and mocking him and criticizing him. And seriously, I look it up. It's wild. Another example, you sort of alluded to this earlier, Josh, but there was a brilliant YouTube video. Again, we'll make sure the the link is in the show notes, but there's a YouTube video of James Franco talking with a professor of some sort. I don't remember what her topic was on abortion, where you just got to see it. It's hilarious. But she basically makes the case that the personhood of an unborn baby is dependent upon whether that baby is wanted by the parent or not. And that depending on if you wake up one morning and feel like you want the baby and wake up the next morning and feel like you don't, that's a person, and then not a person, and then a person again, and then not a person again. And so, whenever you decide to have the abortion, if you just don't feel like having a baby that day, then that's not a person. And you can just see like James Franco and his associate that are there interviewing her are kind of looking with this sort of like amused, like, are you serious right now? Like, and like, these are Hollywood actors, right? These are not exactly. I mean, we're not talking about Ben Shapiro here. I mean, we're talking about mainstream Hollywood actors are looking at this abortion argument and going, "That is just crazy town." But that's the sort of direction that they're going with it, and like you said, I think it's an attempt to justify, and when you're trying to justify something that's increasingly indefensible, you have to come out stronger because you feel like passion can make up for truth.
Yes, but at the same time, I don't, like I said at the beginning, I don't think that abortion is really a topic that has much room for nuance or any room for nuance. If abortion is okay, then it's always okay. And if it's not okay, then it's never okay. And I really think that sort of polarization you're talking about here with the sides becoming more extreme, especially the pro-abortion side becoming more extreme, that actually, I mean, it kind of makes sense. We talk about how we hate polarization in politics, but this is one issue where you really, if you're going to be logical about it, you ought to be polarized. Mm-hmm. And so you talk about this extremism, which of course is abhorrent, talking about killing a baby as it's actually, being born, strangling its first breath, so to speak. But at the same time, that is, if you're going to be pro-abortion, that is the logical place where you have to end up going to. And they're willing to go there. But again, the frustration that I have with the pro-life side is they're not willing to go to their logical extreme.
Right.
Which is to say that it's never okay. So while I, of course would agree that these bills like they're having they just passed in New York saying it's okay to kill a baby up to the moment of birth, of course that's evil, but it's also logical. It's also logically and morally coherent with their worldview, as opposed to what I see the Republicans doing, like what I see Jeff Leach doing here in Texas, which is not logically coherent and which doesn't make any moral sense. And
right.
That's the frustration I really have with all this.
So where do you see this going in the future? Like, I mean, we've talked about the different approaches of kind of the pro-life and the pro-abortion sides on this. And I think it's pretty undeniable the culture is changing on this and attitudes are changing on this. If you see polls of younger Americans, particularly younger women, you'll see that they are increasingly pro-life. And also if you look at the contrast between the direction of particularly the Democratic Party on abortion and the rest of America, that gap is growing wider and wider and wider on the issue of abortion specifically. The numbers are pretty overwhelming. The number of Americans who specifically, according to Gallup, number of Americans who specifically want to see second trimester abortion outlawed is well over 70%. The number who want to see third trimester abortions, which do happen, by the way, who want to see third trimester abortions outlawed is well over 80%. Both of those categories led by women, not by men. And so when you look at that and you compare that to New York and Virginia and these laws that are being passed there, and by the way, the current presidential contenders in the Democratic Party, all of whom, to my knowledge, favor abortion right up until the moment of birth, there's really a widening gap there. And so what I see is, a lot of conservatives are sort of celebrating that and saying, see how out of touch they are. This is going to help us win faster. But to me, I think there's still a long road for us to travel in terms of winning over America, because in the end of the day, a lot of people, a lot of women and men do not care what Cory Booker has to say about it as much as they care about the fact, hey, I had an abortion 5 years ago and now I have a family and I have 2 other kids. How can I live with myself if I embrace the fact that was one of their brothers or sisters that got aborted? These are the types of things that I think it has far less to do with the average American, with their opinion on policy, than it does the personal impact. And that's why I think that story in the Federalist was so impactful, is that at some point, yes, we need to advance the pro-life cause through policy, but I think we also need to address the cultural cost that comes with this. And personally, I think we need to have a national grieving over this, because it's a tragedy and it's an atrocity that's gone on in our country for a really long time. And you don't just snap out of it, you know? So anyway, we've covered this issue several times, and it won't be the last time that we talk about abortion. But where do you line up on this issue? Do you think that we need to continue down the incremental path? Do you think that we need to drop that approach and take the risk of going down the absolutist path? Do you think that will pan out well, considering the way that the courts have ruled so far, now that we have a couple new Supreme Court justices? Is it time to go after Roe? These are all questions that we're going to be asking you on social media this week. Make sure to give us a follow on Twitter at The CI Show, and on Facebook at facebook.com/The CI Show. Got my social media platforms mixed up there. We will talk to you next week. Hopefully we will be getting, I've promised you guys there would be guests on the program. Guests are forthcoming. We have got all the kinks worked out. You can look forward to some exciting speakers coming up in the next few weeks. Make sure to keep tuning in and bringing others with you. Thanks for listening to Constructive Interference.